They are renting a temporary piece of your real estate. They are paying for the ambient conditions you've engineered, and the evidence is in how they behave. They will spend 45 minutes choosing a coffee at home, drive 15 minutes to your store, pay $5.50 for a drink they could have made for 60 cents, and consider the morning a good use of money. But here's where the business math gets complicated. If that same person buys one drink and then sits in your 4-person window seat for 4 hours writing their screenplay on a laptop, you have made $5.50 on real estate you're paying rent on by the square foot. The table that could have turned over 4 times, each time generating another $20 in transactions, instead generated $5.50 for the entire window. This is not a hospitality problem. It is a spatial yield problem. And the cafes that figure out how to manage it through smart seating layouts, long communal bars designed for laptop workers, time-limited Wi-Fi codes printed on receipts, power outlet placement consistently outperform the ones that don't. Most cafe owners start out thinking of food as a nice addition. A few pastries behind the glass, maybe a sandwich or two. This is a mistake. Food done correctly is the mechanism that separates a cafe that survives from one that thrives. Here is why. A $5.50 latte generates about $4.40 in gross profit before overhead.
A $5 croissant sourced from a commercial bakery wholesale generates roughly $4.10 in gross profit. Now consider what happens when a customer buys both, one drink and one pastry. Total ticket, $10.50. Gross profit, around $8.60, nearly double what a drink-only transaction delivers. For a customer who was already going to walk through the door and sit in your chair anyway, you acquired that customer once. You paid rent for that transaction already, but by attaching a food item, you have essentially doubled the gross profit of the visit without any additional real estate cost. This is why the industry has a term for it, the food attach rate. The percentage of drink orders that include a food purchase. A cafe running a 40% food attach rate will consistently outperform one running 15%, even if their coffee sales are identical. The complication is that food spoils. Coffee beans stored correctly last months. A croissant baked this morning is useless by tomorrow afternoon. Unsold pastries in the trash at closing time are pure loss. The ingredients cost money, the storage space cost money, and nothing came back. Managing food inventory requires daily tracking of production against sales, tight purchasing discipline, and willingness to adjust par levels based on what actual traffic data says, not what you hope it says. Labor is the single largest ongoing operating cost in a cafe, and it is the one most likely to sink an otherwise viable business if mismanaged. Across the United States and the United Kingdom, total labor costs, including hourly wages, payroll taxes, workers' compensation insurance, and any benefits, absorb between 25 and 35% of gross revenue in a well-run operation.
In some metropolitan markets, where minimum wage has risen significantly in recent years, that number can push toward 40%. A city like Seattle, where minimum wage reached $19.97 in 2025, creates a fundamentally different labor cost environment than a city in the American South, where the rate is close to $7.25. The same cafe model, the same menu, the same square footage produces wildly different profit outcomes, depending purely on where it happens to be located. What makes cafe labor particularly difficult to manage is that espresso-based beverages cannot be automated without fundamentally changing what the customer is buying. A human barista pulls the shot, steams the milk, and builds the drink. That process requires skill, repetition, and presence. You cannot replace it with software. What you can control is scheduling. The most effective labor management tool available to a cafe owner is granular historical sales data from their point-of-sale system. Every cafe has a predictable revenue shape across the week. A morning rush between 7 and 10:30 that generates the bulk of daily transactions, a quieter mid-afternoon, a slightly elevated late morning window on weekends. Scheduling staff tightly to match that shape, running 2 or 3 baristas during the morning rush and dropping to 1 during the 2 p.m. lull can reduce total labor hours by 15 to 20% without changing the customer experience at all. Employee turnover adds another layer of cost. The cost to recruit, onboard, and train a replacement barista in lost productivity, wasted product, training hours, and slower service during the transition runs between $1,500 and $3,000 per departure. In an industry where annual staff turnover often exceeds 50% at the hourly level,
that adds up fast. The cafes that manage labor well invest in their people early. Fair wages, clear schedules, genuine development opportunities. Because the financial cost of losing a trained barista is almost always higher than the cost of keeping them happy. Ask a first-time cafe owner what their monthly expenses are, and they'll tell you rent, coffee beans, milk, and staff. They will typically forget about 8 to 12 other things that, added together, quietly drain the margin between a profitable month and a loss. Credit card processing fees. In the United States, when a customer taps their phone or card to pay for a $6 latte, between 1.5% and 3.5% of that transaction goes to the payment network. It's automatic, it's invisible, and across a year of 2,000 transactions per month, it amounts to thousands of dollars disappearing before they ever hit the owner's bank account. Software subscriptions. A modern cafe requires cloud-based point-of-sale software, employee scheduling tools, inventory management, and an accounting integration. These subscriptions run $300 to $1,000 per month and are essentially non-optional in a competitive market. Music licensing.
If your cafe plays music, and virtually every cafe does, you are legally required to hold commercial performance licenses from organizations like ASCAP and BMI in the United States, or PRS for music in the United Kingdom. Annual fees typically run between $300 and $900, depending on venue size and hours of operation. Playing a Spotify personal account through a Bluetooth speaker in a commercial setting is a copyright violation, and the licensing organizations actively pursue violators. Food waste and spoilage. Between expired dairy, unsold pastries, spilled milk from failed drink builds, and barista training mistakes, typical cafes lose between 2 and 5% of total inventory value every month to waste. This is not laziness, it's physics. Milk expires, croissants go stale, syrups get contaminated. Managing this requires obsessive par-level discipline and willingness to under-order until you have solid sales data. Commercial utilities. A commercial espresso machine running multiple boilers at operating temperature draws significant electrical load. Add refrigeration units, ice machines, dishwashers, and full climate control, and monthly utility bills for a small cafe run $400 to $1,200, depending on energy rates and store size. Together, these overlooked costs routinely add $5,000 to $8,000 in annual expenses to a cafe that didn't account for them in its opening financial model. That's the difference between a 10% net margin and a 4% one. A well-run independent cafe in the United States generating $500,000 in annual gross sales, which is roughly in the middle of the typical range for small to medium-sized urban stores, will produce a financial picture that looks something like this. Cost of goods sold, including all coffee beans, dairy, food purchases, and packaging, will absorb around $140,000, or 28% of revenue. Total staff payroll and taxes will run $160,000, or 32%. Rent and occupancy expenses will take $45,000, or 9%. Utilities will cost $7,500. Credit card processing will consume $12,500. Software, marketing, and insurance will add $20,000.
Equipment maintenance and food waste allowance will run $15,000. What's left? $50,000. 10% of gross revenue. That is the net pre-tax operating profit for a reasonably well-managed cafe doing $500,000 in annual sales. Now, factor in the owner's salary. If the owner is working full-time as the general manager, which virtually every independent cafe owner does, they need to pay themselves a market rate salary of somewhere between $40,000 and $65,000, either from that profit or in addition to it. Most owners structure it as the latter, meaning total personal take-home between $70,000 and $125,000 per year when the salary and the profit draw are combined. Given that you invested $150,000 to $300,000 to open the store, a realistic payback period on that initial capital is 3 to 5 years, assuming the store performs at or above the median. That is a reasonable business return, comparable to what you'd get from a well-managed small franchise or a stable dividend-paying investment. But it is not wealth generation. It is income generation. A single cafe very rarely makes anyone rich.
What it does consistently is create a stable middle-class income for someone willing to work inside it every day. In a strong year, prime location, strong foot traffic, a food attach rate above 40%, disciplined labor scheduling, low turnover, a well-run cafe generating $500,000 in revenue produces a net profit of $50,000 to $75,000 before the owner's draw. In a hard year, a major road closure cutting foot traffic for 3 months, a key barista leaving and taking regulars with them, an espresso machine requiring an unplanned $8,000 repair, a cold winter suppressing January and February foot traffic. The same cafe generates $350,000 in revenue and produces a net loss of $15,000 to $30,000. The difference between a good year and a bad year is roughly $100,000 in outcome, and very little of it is within the owner's control once the store is open. The location, the equipment, the staff, those decisions were made before the doors opened. The risk was baked in before the first latte was ever poured.
This is what the romanticized version of cafe ownership never shows you. The owner who shows up at 6 in the morning and leaves at 7 at night is not just making coffee. They are managing a real estate investment, a human resources operation, a logistics chain, a brand identity, and a customer psychology experience, simultaneously, every day, usually without a manager beneath them to absorb any of it. A single cafe run well produces an income. A scaled cafe operation produces wealth. The moment a successful owner opens a second location, the economics change structurally. Administrative overhead, the accountant, the scheduling software, the branding, the social media presence is largely fixed. Adding a second store adds revenue without proportionally adding those fixed costs. A third, a fourth, a fifth, each increases revenue while overhead stays largely flat. This is how chains are born. The other transformation that unlocks real value is vertical integration through roasting. A cafe owner purchasing pre-roasted specialty coffee beans at $11 to $13 per pound from a wholesale roaster is paying for the roaster's equipment, labor, margin, and distribution. The operator who builds or acquires their own commercial roastery and purchases raw green beans directly from an importer at $2.50 to $4.50 per pound changes the entire unit economics of every beverage they sell. And because the roaster is now a production facility, they can wholesale beans to other cafes, hotels, and offices, turning what was a cost center into a new revenue line. Starbucks began as a single store in Seattle's Pike Place Market in 1971. Blue Bottle Coffee started in a San Francisco farmers market in 2002 and was acquired by Nestle in 2017 for close to $500 million. Intelligentsia Coffee opened in Chicago in 1995. Each followed the same structural logic. Prove the model in one location, develop a brand identity strong enough to travel, add locations and production infrastructure, and eventually either franchise or sell. The difference between the owner of one cafe and the founder of a coffee brand is not better coffee. It's the decision to treat the first store as a prototype rather than the destination. Owning a cafe is not a coffee business. It is a real estate business, a labor business, a brand business, and a psychology business. And those four things happen to be funded by the sale of hot beverages and pastries. The math is not generous. On every $5 transaction, the owner keeps less than $1 after true costs are accounted for. The first 3 to 5 years of ownership consume the initial capital investment before the business begins to generate real returns. The failure rate is high because most people enter believing they are buying a lifestyle and discover they have bought an operational management problem requiring daily presence, financial discipline, and the ability to make dozens of small decisions correctly across payroll, inventory, real estate, and customer experience simultaneously and without a safety net. And yet, a well-run cafe in a smart location with a trained team, a strong food program, and an owner who treats it like a business rather than a passion project can produce a stable and rewarding income for 15, 20, 30 years. The owners who thrive are not the ones who make the best espresso in the neighborhood. They're the ones who understand that what they're really selling is the place people don't want to leave, and then build every single operational decision around making sure leaving is the last thing anyone wants to.